And everybody else, you're already seated, so I don't have to tell you to do anything. Thank you so much. Welcome back for our last panel of the day, cultural heritage and tourism. Ever since kind of the European settlers on the East Coast figured out how to get out west, the West has been a major destination for people seeking out wide open spaces and natural beauty. Major tourism destinations in recent years, especially those that have national parks and ski resorts, have actually been struggling to handle the growing crowds of visitors. We've got some of our more popular national parks that are now trying to figure out different ways to limit the number of visitors and their impacts on the parks. It's a situation where they're victimized by their own success in marketing those destinations to visitors, both domestic and international. At the same time, studies are showing that tourists are increasingly wanting something very unique, maybe artisanal, different. They're motivated by authenticity and experience, and they want to have something to brag about on social media. So there are all kinds of opportunities for rural communities to capitalize on this preference, on this trend, by highlighting what is unique about them. Tourists are eager to get off the beaten path and to experience the history, the people, the culture of rural areas, and rural communities can leverage this to help stimulate their local economies. In addition to attracting more visitors and generating some revenues, creating pride of place also builds community and supports all arts and culture, which also positively affects economic development and community development. So to learn more about how cultural tourism is being utilized by communities in New Mexico and across the West, we have a great panel of experts. Melvin Juanico manages the Sky City Cultural Center and Haak'u Museum, which serves as the reception center and museum for visitors to the Pueblo of Acoma. Angelisa Murray is a longtime travel guide and owner of Heritage Inspirations, which provides handcrafted tours highlighting adventure, art, culture, and heritage across New Mexico. Sherry Rupert is the executive director of IANTA, A-I-A-N-T-A, which is the only organization specifically dedicated to advancing Indian country tourism across the United States. So we're delighted to hear from each of you, and Melvin, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hope we're still awake. My name is Melvin Juanico. I serve as the operations manager for the Sky City Culture Center and Haak'u Museum in Acoma, New Mexico. I opened up with the introduction, a welcome in my native tongue, as customary as Native Americans, as Pueblo Indians here in New Mexico. And for those of you for the first time here in New Mexico, welcome to Native New Mexico. There's a lot to see here. As mentioned, the Sky City Culture Center Haak'u Museum serves as the receptive, or even as I say, the welcoming center to our historical site, Acoma Pueblo, also known as Sky City, New Mexico. Acoma is located 60 miles west of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and of course, located another 16 miles off Interstate 40 from our very own exit casino, Sky City Casino Hotel and Travel Center. But what's so unique about the Sky City Culture Center Haak'u Museum is that the building itself has been in existence for 11 years. Now, really, tourism at Acoma, Native American tribes, or Native New Mexico, has been since the 1920s, if you will. And we've come a long way with the fact that, as was mentioned, people want to see something that's really to get an ultimate experience. If you come to Acoma Pueblo, you will definitely get that. I've been employed with the Sky City Culture Center about a week before it opened up in May of 2006. And I have to say, of all the jobs I've ever had in my life, this is far the best because it's good PR. You know, good public relations, because you get to meet everyone and anyone, and you get to explain about the oral history of Acoma Pueblo. We are considered to be, if anything, the oldest continuously inhabited community in North America, dating back to 1150 AD. So it's all about preservation of the culture, the tradition, and most importantly, our Acoma language. When I said earlier, Sky City, our village actually sits 370 feet above desert floor. And what's so unique about that is we still live up there the old traditional way. There's no running water, there's no electricity up there, but we still make do with how we live in the traditional essence. We do have other villages to the north, again, with the convenience of running water, electricity, closer to the schools, closer to the jobs. But when we have our traditional activities or our feast days, pretty much every family home on the rock is actually occupied with close to 360 family homes on the mesa. So when I say the rock, it's like, sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? We live on the rock. But hey, it's Native Americans. That's what's really cool about us here in New Mexico, is the fact that we share our tradition and our culture with many folks out in the community, especially those from not only the United States, but from all over the globe. And we are getting a lot of international tourism that's coming in, which is really awesome. It's really unique. And again, it's all about promoting, it's all about networking and coming out. So that's who we are as Acoma Native people, and I'll mention more about that here in a bit.
Great. Angelisa.
Hi, I'm Angelisa Murray, owner of Heritage Inspirations. And you know, I always like to say that Heritage Inspirations is a love letter to New Mexico. This has been an incredible opportunity of taking the different places that I've been able to travel around the world, and being here in New Mexico, we curate immersive tours, as you heard, uniquely throughout the state. I personally live in the northern area in Taos, and Taos is about 10% of the population of Santa Fe. And then we curate down into Albuquerque, as well as into the southern reaches of our area. And the passion is about telling stories. You know, so many people that are traveling want to connect. They want to learn. They want to be and feel like you're with family or with locals. And that's really how we curate. One of the opportunities that I have with Heritage Inspirations is that we're partnered with a local hotelier here. Some of you may have heard of them. They're right across the street here at El Dorado, but Heritage Hotels and Resorts. And this was sort of born out of my background, comes from hotel restaurant management, and I started in working in different hotels, Four Seasons hotels right out of college. And one of the things that I realized quickly is that I love the outdoors, and I spent, after that, the next 15 years working and traveling all over the world, cultivating different experiences with other indigenous tribes, everywhere from New Zealand to Alaska to Hawaii to here in northern New Mexico. And the one thing that I've learned in terms of travel is that people are now wanting to experience something. In terms of what people are investing in, I think the greatest opportunity that we have is connecting them to, as we say it here in New Mexico, we are the land of enchantment. We have a lot of opportunities within our bucolic and rural spaces to tell different stories. And so what we do with our guides is try to connect with people like Melvin in Acoma Pueblo and our other 19 pueblos that we have, and tell unique stories that also, as Jim connected, people started to learn about the West really as the rail yard comes out here. And up in Taos, we have our Taos Society of Artists, where people started to become interested in Native American culture within the adobe architecture and our cerulean skies that we have here. And it's been one of those things that's been attracting people again and again. And so the opportunity, to continuously connect people to our heritage here is at the heart of what we do.
Great, thanks. Sherry.
Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Rupert, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association. I am Washoe and Paiute from the great state of Nevada, and I've spent the last 15 years as the Executive Director of the Nevada Indian Commission, so the Indian Affairs Director for the state and for the governor. I was appointed in 2005 by Governor Kenny Gwinn and lived through Mr. Gibbons and Governor Sandoval, and then Mr. Steve Sisolak also reappointed me. But in May, I decided to retire from the state of Nevada and take the executive director position for IANTA. I've spent the last 10 years on the board of directors of IANTA and in working with tribes across the nation to help them to develop tourism by delivering technical assistance and training through IANTA. And I was looking through some statistics this morning in regard to rural tourism, and in the top 5 that travelers are interested in seeing when they come here are rural, actually our native sites. And if you look at domestic travelers, they're interested in the rural activities. And so most of our tribes reside in the rural areas of this country. And so tourism is really important to our tribes. One other point that I wanted to make is that not only is rural tourism important to tribes, but also to the outlying or ancillary communities to our tribal areas. And so everybody wins. I believe in tourism. You mentioned over-tourism in some areas like the national parks. And IANTA has worked with the Grand Canyon and the 11 tribes there of the Grand Canyon at the Desert View Watchtower area. And that is one area that has really increased in the visitation there at that particular area. And that's because they were able to bring those 11 tribes in and to help the park to interpret that from the tribal perspective. So giving a whole new perspective to the Grand Canyon, to be able to talk to the people that actually live there and continue to live there for thousands of years. And so it's become a really popular area. So what we're trying to do as IANTA is to really continue to work with the National Park Service across the nation and to drive those visitors and visitation to the tribal communities that are gateway communities to many of these national parks. So I was really excited to know about this new initiative with the Western Governors Association. And the governor from North Dakota, Burgum, to have him bring this forward and to talk about tribal issues, not just cultural heritage tourism, but the state-tribal relationships between the sovereign governments. And so, happy to be here.
Great, thank you. And that is a huge priority of our chairman, so I appreciate your acknowledging that. Melvin, talk a little about the opening of the center and the impact that that's had on the community. Has it affected other businesses?
Yes, well, as part of the Sky City Culture Center Haak'u Museum, the impact that it has on the community is, of course, first and foremost, creating jobs for our very own community members. During our peak season, we have up to 25 tribal members that serve under my wing. And right now we're on our seasonal schedule. Unfortunately, during the winter months, tourism season really slows down, so we have to cut down on staff. But that also gives them the opportunity to collaborate and enter into our other Acoma business enterprises within the tribe, such as the Sky City Casino, Hotel, Travel Center. We have the big game hunts, we have landing cattle. So there are other opportunities for our tribal members. Also with the Acoma Business Enterprise, not only do we employ our own tribal members, but non-tribal members as well. So again there, with that being said, the opening of the Sky City Culture Center and the Haak'u Museum which actually we have as part of our admissions package, of course, the public guided tour, the museum admissions, and of course the cafe and the gift shop. It's all unique in the sense that even our own tribal members come in and spend the day with us, have maybe a nice hearty meal. So they get that part of that experience by coming to see us there at the Sky City Culture Center and bring their friends, their relatives as well, and experience Acoma. Even though if they're tribal members, they like to go on that public guided tour and learn about their own history, which they're kind of fascinated by the fact that, wow, this is really our history. So to answer your question on that, yes, sir.
And has the National Trust for Historic Preservation designation had any impact on your operations?
Well, of course, the National Trust for Historic Preservation out of Washington, D.C. originally recognized Acoma Pueblo, the Sky City, not so much the Sky City Cultural Center and Haak'u Museum, but we do have communication going with them to where we're actually working on some other projects. We want to build a whole new museum and a permanent museum where it displays a lot of, who we are in our tribal homes, in our Pueblo homes. So that's one connection that we're working with the National Trust.
Do you coordinate with other tribes at all to market your tourist destinations and amenities?
Most definitely, yes. That's the important part of it all. As Native Americans, it's always good to partner with one another, share stories, and we really all have the same similarities of who we are and what we want to expose out there. Of course, we're limited with a lot of information because of the sacredness of who we are. But not only Native American tribes that we're partnering with, we're also partnering, like, of course, IANTA is one of our big supporters, Heritage Inspirations, New Mexico Tourism Department. So a lot of programs out there, not only in New Mexico, but in the Four Corner regions, are actually partners with us to where we promote one another and get the word out. Let people come and see who we are and what we have to share as Native Americans.
So for any tribe or community that's thinking of launching this journey and becoming a tourist destination, what tips or strategies might you offer them? What would be the first steps?
First and foremost, I always invite them to come out and visit with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do. Not only have we had people that have not been invited, they just wanted to come out, not only from New Mexico.
There, you need to help develop tourism. You guys are the experts, so get out there and help them.
Let's talk for a minute about sustainable tourism and environmental impacts of tourism. So I'm from Arizona, and I spent a lot of time on different reservations. I remember one time in particular, going up to the Hopi Reservation for an event, and I got way off the beaten path. And it was absolutely magical. It was stunning. I'm going through these arroyos, these incredible canyons with rich striated walls. The colors were bursting. The wildlife was teeming. And as you said, Angelisa, it was an utterly visceral experience. And it was magical, and it was solitary. Now, it would have been a much different experience if there had been a bunch of tourists with cameras and Jeep tours and all that. And I would be the last person to begrudge anybody the economic development opportunities of tourism. But how do you, and I'm sure you're extremely sensitive to the environment, but how do you balance the impacts of tourism on the natural environment?
Well, for us at Acoma, and it's really identified as when we say Pablo guided tours. Again, we welcome everyone to come to learn about how we came about. We actually migrated, really, they say, from Asia, settled in Mesa Verde area and Chaco Canyon, and those are our ancestral sites. Quick story here is that they knew they were going to face impact with drought, invasion, and whatnot, so they sent out messengers to the different areas. Messenger went to Acoma, went on one top of a mesa, and did a certain call or yell, and it wasn't the right one, so he went to Acoma, where we're at now, and so now our people are settled there. But there was a reason, there's always a reason for that. And again, when people come to visit to learn about how we came about, we have to have control of that. It's interesting, and again, there's one ethnic group from that's international tourists that always come out and they say, well, why can't we wander your grounds? It's a free country. I said, it's a free country, but we're a Native American tribe. We're a sovereign nation. So we got to have control because of the unique sacredness of who we are and how our ancestors came about, brought us what tradition we follow, and we're still preserving that. Why? Because we still want our younger generation to continue that culture, that way of livelihood. So when we talk about sustainable tourism, it's basically about having that control, but yet still be able to have people have the ultimate experience. And when I say ultimate experience is because when we ask them at the end of the day, at the end of their visit, how was your visit? It was spiritual.
Right.
It was so spiritual. You let us walk your sacred ground. You let us walk down the old stone staircase. So there is a little sense of where you let them kind of go freely, but still they stay within their limits. But we tell them if one area they can't take pictures is inside the cemetery walls, inside the mission church, because there's some sacredness to it as well, not only in the Catholic faith, but in the traditional faith. So we tell them, if you get caught taking pictures in the cemetery, in the church, guess what we're going to do? We're going to call security, and we're going to throw you off the edge like they did years ago. No, we don't tell them that, but I'm just saying. But you get where I'm coming from.
I do.
So as stewards of, being tour guides and so forth, I think it's a really important responsibility for us. One of the few things that we do is having a Leave No Trace association, and we teach our guests as we come into particular areas. And a lot of our permitting with the BLM, the National Park Services, or monuments that we have to be a commercial operation are, also make us to tell these stories of people's impact and so forth. One of the things that I had experienced, I used to do these wilderness safaris in Alaska, and I used to take people on a hypothermic river and go up to the glaciers and all of these rural, unique areas and teach people in an educational experience about glaciology and so forth. And we would come out of the wilderness after 10 days of experiencing wild Alaska into what we used to call Glitter Gulch in Denali National Park, where it was just this overwhelming area where everybody's buying trinkets and going to restaurants and so forth. And you heard the Alaskan Railway and all these particular groups that were getting off basically the cruise lines and waddling, to their particular number, and it was by the masses. And if there's anything more disturbing, just as a tour guide, it was like, wow, we can really impact the earth. And I worked for the largest active travel company in the world for a decade, and I'll be honest, I finally left that company because they ended up going into Iceland and asking to develop particular roads in rural areas of communities that really weren't ready for the masses of people to come in. And one thing that I feel is that, especially in such a wild, massive space like New Mexico, we sort of think that we have so much space and it doesn't really matter, or that we can't make an impact, and yet you do. And so what we practice is pint-sized tours. And yes, of course, if we're taking larger groups to go out, because you have museums that partner with us, you just have larger associations. We have a 1-to-8 ratio. So meaning that if everybody was on the same tour with us, we would have, for every 8 people, a guide that's taking and giving you that opportunity not only to hear, because once you get into the big masses, it loses the charm. It loses the opportunity to connect one-on-one with each other, to learn these greater stories, to be able to ask questions and so forth. And I think it's a really powerful thing. So,
Thanks. Sherry, you may.
So I like that. We need to teach manners, right, when we're going out to these sacred spots. We live in a technology world. You guys were just talking about some of that. And, the taking of the photos so you can put it on Instagram. I just recently saw an article on that in Antelope Canyon, and the slot canyons down there. They're so beautiful, and everybody wants a photo, right? They want to be able to post it up there. But they're climbing on the rocks. They're scratching the rocks up. And if they do that, then they're not going to be there for generations to come. And so I've been hearing this from some of the native tour operators down there, that these visitors just have no manners, and it's really difficult for them. And now they're rethinking how they give these tours Do they give less tours? Do they have smaller groups so they can keep a better eye on them? Do they do more education about, leave no trace and don't crawl on things? So it definitely is an impact, and that's something I think that some of the native tour operators are running across, is that we definitely need to do some more training. We need to rethink how we do our tours and how many we have on those tours. So again, the control of how many people that you're allowing to come into the canyons.
Great. Sherry, can you talk a little bit about the Native American Tourism and Improving Visitor Experience Native Act, and how has the passing of that act altered trends of tribal tourism in the U.S.?
Sure. The Native Act, very familiar with this one. We've been working with Congress on this for quite some time. It was a long process of gaining bipartisan support and support of the tribes across the nation. Finally passed in 2016, and now we're in the implementation phase. What the act was meant to do was to coordinate federal efforts of those federal agencies that have tourism authorities, making sure that they're including tribes and tribes in their management plans or in their planning, and also the role that IANTA has in this is we were named the facilitator of certain portions of the act. We have entered into an MOU with the Department of Interior and the Department of Commerce, and so we are working on the first part of our role, and that is to determine or define the need in Indian country as far as tourism is concerned. And then the second part is to deliver the technical assistance and training that we found in the first part. So we're working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs under the Department of Interior on this. We're going to be rolling out listening sessions across the country and all regions of the country. And I actually just met with the state Indian Affairs directors last week and let them know about the Native Act and that I would be calling upon them, because I know all of them, to really work with them when we come out to the different regions and getting the tribes to the table, the tourism people to the table, to talk about tourism and the needs in your specific states across the country. So it's really meant to empower tribes, to provide resources for tourism development, including training and technical assistance.
Great, thank you so much. Let's open up the conversation to the room down here. Thanks. Up here, Kevin.
Sherry, I have a question for you specifically. You said that you're working with tribes on tourism and the training, and I guess one of the questions I have as somebody who does rural development has to do with, I have two questions. One of it is, how is it that you are working with communities kind of in a holistic way, where most tribes are in rural places and there's rural tourism and then there's tribal tourism, and kind of how that interplays with one another? And the second one I have is, we were working with our WealthWorks initiative. We're working in a couple of communities related, one that is tribal and then multiple that are just rural, related to agritourism and food-based tourism, and really working to try to figure out how to to create wealth and to create jobs that aren't just service-based jobs, and so they're kind of a higher wealth building, and the community captures some of that. So I guess two questions. One is how are the tribes working with the rural communities kind of in together with their adjacent communities? And then what is your thoughts about kind of building wealth and increasing the wages on those jobs so they're not just service level jobs in tourism?
Okay, those are hard questions.
I know. I just have, could you get to them in really like
his
tomorrow?
questions.
Yeah, sorry.
So in working in rural communities, of course, it's always challenging. Yeah. Yeah. And so, again, I think it's really about collaboration. It's about communicating with each other. Oftentimes I see that that's not happening in the rural communities. And so that connection needs to be made between the tribes and the local CVB. And that's something that we talk about all of the time at IANTA is, you know, they're there to market you, they're there to help you, but if they don't know what you have, then how can they do that? How can they do their job? And they have resources that are available to you. So it's just kind of breaking down that barrier and building those relationships. And if it's one thing that I learned as the Indian Affairs Director for the state of Nevada, is that our tribes are, many can be very cautious about working with people outside of their community. And so you have to, especially with government, tribes don't have a great relationship with the federal government. We've had a long kind of storied past with the federal government, and they see state government as the same way. You know, a lot of the federal funds are now being funneled through state government, and tribes don't like that. They want it to come directly to them. And so you have to build that relationship. You have to go and talk with each other and build that trust.
Are you doing that well, or do you have methods that you're doing that? I know that you're, sorry, not mine. I just know that is where I see a big divide. I guess I think that's just where I see a big divide is actually in those adjacent communities. Is there's almost a bigger divide in the community, the adjacent rural community, if you will. And in Oregon, there are reservations, right? Not all, but our tribes there are reservations, and so the adjacent reservations and the communities themselves, I think, struggle to figure out how to do that and kind of build that trust in a way that is more local.
Many tribes are building alliances within their regions, and so with the other tribes, and then also bringing in the other tourism entities to work with, and that seems to be helping, creating those alliances amongst the tribes for tourism, and then bringing in the tourism professionals as well. And then what was your second part?
My second question, and it's probably for all of you, related to the idea of increasing wealth via tourism and not have it be a sector that it doesn't replace family-based jobs in most communities, right? They tend to be service-level jobs, and how is it that we increase the value of those jobs, and any successes that you're having on that of increasing wealth in the community?
If I can also respond to that first question in the sense as far as, of course, we all know that every reservation is different across the nation. So every tribe is not going to have the same feedback or maybe the correspondence of having that relationship with maybe the state level or other areas, rural areas in the community, because, you know, I'll take for us, again, going back to what I said, we're a sovereign nation. So we have that right to make that decision, but it's only right that we too seek for assistance, seek help. So with that being said, you know, again, there's an MOU or MOA that can come into play to identify that, okay, this is what we agreed on, this is the help we're looking for from other rural companies or even just other tourism industry partners altogether. This is how we're going to make this happen to get the word out to promote Native American tourism, okay? Now, again, going to the fact that for us, with economic development, well, how is it that we can better increase our tourism to where we're open, gosh, year-round, 7 days a week, okay? Because as I said earlier, we're feeling the impact, and it's not just Acoma. We were just talking earlier, but there's a lot of us tourism programs here in New Mexico that are really hurting during the winter months. One, tour operators, for whatever reason, do not book during the winter months, okay? Not as many people travel during the winter months. I envy Taos during the winter months. Boy, they get a lot of traffic, and I kind of tease Taos Pueblo. I said, man, I said, you guys get all the traffic because you have Tauski Valley. If you didn't have Tauski Valley, you guys would be hurting. But I, just tease them about that. But again, it just depends what rural communities around have that leverage for them to be able to visit them. So every location is unique in its own way. So again, their job security, it just depends on the tourism traffic flow for us. Again, because we're hurting, then we have to cut down on staff because it hurts the business revenue-wise. And that's something that, as tour operators, we have to look at. So I hope that someone answered your question.
Thank you.
Over back here, Kevin.
Good afternoon. My name is Priscilla Lucetto, and I'm a Executive Director of Southwest New Mexico Council of Governments. I cover 4 counties in Southwest New Mexico. And I really wanted to share around some of the questions that you had, and it's not really tied into a lot specifically around tourism, but I think I wanted to share something that's very unique to New Mexico with regards to how we've been able to partner not only with tribal entities, but also with Colonial's designated areas. And how many of you are familiar with Colonial's designated areas? So those areas are primarily in southern New Mexico, which is 150 miles of the border, again, lacking inadequate infrastructure. And the same thing is kind of with tribal issues that we have lacking that adequate infrastructure. So one of the things that I think has really bridged the gap in New Mexico with these programs is that we had a local legislator who partnered, legislator that was from my area that partnered with other legislators in the state of New Mexico in the tribal areas to actually introduce a piece of legislation that would actually take a set aside about 4.5% from the capital outlay dollars to provide adequate infrastructure for these communities. So that it would benefit. We now have a tribal infrastructure fund, and now we have a Colonial's infrastructure fund. That is like history that was made here in New Mexico, because I can tell you that that would have never happened if it wouldn't have been for the collaboration and the partnership among those areas between the tribal legislators as well as the local leaders in southern New Mexico to accomplish that. That is one way of how that has really benefited, and I can tell you we started out with a pot of money of about 16 million. I think this year that's 16 million per fund, so it's evenly distributed, and now you're seeing some of those basic needs met, but some of those basic needs sometimes are absolutely necessary to be able to create some of these tourism activities, whether it's access and roads and accessibility, resolving drainage concerns. So that is one where I think based on then, and you could probably speak to that, Melvin, is that has really bridged a lot of the gap and the trust among working collaboratively from a government standpoint, a local government, local localities, and all state agencies. So we are truly blessed in New Mexico with that fund.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Who here has been to the Pueblo of Acoma? Wow, quite a few. Is Melvin overselling it, or is it worth my while to visit? Yeah. I'm going to give each of you the opportunity to offer some final thoughts or comments, or even if you must, a just naked marketing pitch.
Okay. So we talked about tourism for rural areas, but just to show you the impact of tourism and what it can be, we get most of our statistics from the U.S. Department of Commerce, and in 2018 there were 1.986 million travelers, international visitors that came to Indian country. That's 5% of all visitors that come to the United States. Those visitors that come to Indian country statistically spend more, stay longer, they like to shop, they're not afraid of renting cars, and that's good because we're in rural areas. So there's just a ton of potential out there. And we've been, one more statistic, international travel to Indian country has increased 187% since 2007. And so, again, a tremendous potential out there to work with your tribal communities, because as we know, as we were just talking about, it's not just, those new revenues coming into the tribal communities, but it's coming into your state, it's being spent in your state, and it's also being spent in those rural communities that are just adjacent to the tribal communities. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Thanks. Angelisa.
So what I would finish with is one of the challenges is also the blessings in what we do with curating in rural areas. And when it comes to places, like, along the high road, or basically a historical area from Taos to Santa Fe, we, have a lot of Spanish colonial churches that don't have particular funding anymore. They're not able to keep them up. And as I keep looking, just as a travel operator, also trying to be a steward of preserving our heritage and our culture as we curate and we invite more people into these unique areas, I think just in terms of a state, in travel and tourism, it's focusing on the experience as a whole and not necessarily segregating into the particular focus so much of our towns and our cities. And one of the things that a lot of people ask me about is that Heritage Inspirations, even though I live in Taos, our corporate offices are in Albuquerque and we curate all over, people don't really understand where it is we are or what our focuses are. And my passion is just about telling a deeper story into places that people could not Google about or would not be able to find about, because you illuminate those people that they don't know how to Instagram, or they don't know how to market themselves. They don't know how to create experiences uniquely. And so we try to bridge a gap that way. And it's time consuming and it's exhausting. And I was telling them one of the unique experiences that I'm so proud of that took me about 2.5 years is in our Pablo in Taos. I work with the director of tourism, much like Melvin's position at Acoma, to create an Horno baking experience. And Horno baking is a traditional oven within our pueblos and giving people that opportunity. But because the tribal government changes every single year within our sovereign nations, you have something that moves in momentum, and then you get to January and all that gets dropped, and I have to almost restart the wheel. And then what I would just say is that we have to look at it more collaboratively than people being our competition. And I think that needs to change if we're going to unveil these great opportunities for people to experience our rural places and to stop bickering over things that don't matter. And that's one of the things that within my own town of Taos, you have different people who, of course, we're all travel companies and we compete in some ways, but really it's just we have our own unique offering, and to create and cultivate unison versus separation. And if you want to learn more about our tours, I did give them to Laura, and you're more than welcome to look at our brochures that we have. But it's a true honor to be a part of this, and I thank you all very much.
Thank you, Angelisa. I think it was in our workforce initiative that somebody was using the term collaboration. So that's a.
So Native New Mexico is about preservation, culture, and enriched history. So if you haven't had that opportunity to visit our Pueblo tribes, our Native American tribes, please do so. I encourage you, yes, to come up to Acoma Pueblo, Sky City, experience what we have to offer. I'm proud to say 5 years in a row, including this year, we received a Certificate of Excellence Award from TripAdvisor. And that was based on customers' experience, getting the ultimate spiritual experience from us, okay? Also, we invite you to our feast day on September 2nd. Every year we have our annual feast day where we mix the Catholic faith culture along with our traditional dance, which is the harvest dance. Question, how many of you are from Denver? Okay, well, just keep coming back to New Mexico and enjoy our green chili, because we do have the best. Not Denver, all right? And one last story I have to share, and this isn't going to take too long. So, really inspirational story to me. I'm going to share it because I think you'll be touched by it. As Native Americans, right, we have medicine men on the reservation. Well, it's interesting. There was this story. This man, a white man, okay, came to the reservation. He needed help. He was feeling sick. Poor guy, So he come to the reservation, knocked on the village door. And so a tribal member answered the door. Says, hi. I said, how can I help you? So I'm feeling very ill. I'm hurting. I need a medicine man to cure me. Okay, go down the road, down the aisle, 3 houses down, knock on the door, and medicine man should be home. So, man, makes his way. He's over there, got his hopes up really high. He's gonna get cured. Knocks on the door, and the medicine man answers. He says, "How can I help you?" I says, "I'm sick. I need help. Come on in, sir. Sit down on this stool right here." So the medicine man gets gathers his stuff that he's going to use for the curing ceremony. And he sits down in front of him and says, "Okay, curing ceremony is going to begin." So he breaks out the cornmeal and he puts the feathers there. So he starts chanting, starts doing his thing with the cornmeal and the feathers. So, and it's really just an intense moment. This white man's feeling the spirituality, like, man, he's going to cure me. So as it was happening, the black cat came into the house, sat by the medicine man. So the medicine man looked over and he grabbed the cat and started going like this, put it down, and then the cat walks away. So he sang a few more songs, chanted, and then, so he tells him, "Sir, the healing ceremony has ended. That'll be $150. Man will go, $150? Yes, $50 for the cornmeal, $50 for the feathers, $50 for the CAT scan.
Oh.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh. So on that really painful note, let's give our panel a great big round of applause. All right. So that is the end of the formal conversations for today, but not the end of the conversations altogether, because we're going to ask you all to repair to a reception right outside the doors here, and then tomorrow morning breakfast is available at 7:30, and we're going to start with our panel discussions straight up at 8 o'clock. But I want to thank you all for a very rewarding day, a constructive day, and so appreciate your engagement, your participation, and for being here. Thank you.